So in today's video, we are going to talk all about the dismissive avoidant in friendship. We're going to cover 10 core qualities of the dismissive avoidant. And my hope is that you're going to be able to not just find out what somebody's attachment style is in your life, even looking at like your parents and how they are in friendships, or your siblings, or your kids, or of course, your own friends, or yourself, right, in friendships. But from these 10 points, you're also going to learn the roadmap if you do have a dismissive avoidant friend to connect with that friend in really powerful, meaning ways and to have a friendship that really lasts. And the first one's going to be really easy and pretty straightforward, but as we get through them, they're going to get progressively more surprising. So, especially the ones towards the end, you might be really shocked in terms of what they're needing, what they're really looking for. We'll talk about that at the end, the different things that affect them the most and their fears in friendships. So we will cover all of it here right now. So if you've been following this channel for a little while, you know that I often use the analogy that our attachment style is basically the subconscious set of rules that we've learned in terms of how to relate to other people. And what this means is that if, as an example, you sit down to play a board game with somebody and you have the rules for Monopoly, well, they have the rules for Scrabble or some other board game. Even if you want to sit down and intend to have fun and have a good time, because your rules are different, it's almost impossible to play the game in a way that's functional and easy. And that analogy is used to represent that if you have a different attachment style than somebody, your rules for love, connection, friendship, are going to be completely different. And that's going to lead to a lot of confusion and often conflict. So let's break this down so that you can understand the rule book of a dismissive avoidant as a friend and what they're expecting, what they hope a friendship to look like. And this even applies to things like after a breakup or after things fall apart. What is somebody even expecting or hoping when it comes to a friendship? So first and foremost, one of the biggest things you'll see, and this is pretty, easy to note, is dismissive avoidants are slower to warm up in friendships. So they will usually be a little bit more private and a little bit more guarded, just like you would see in a lot of times with dating. They won't necessarily share much about their feelings right away. They'll be slower moving. They won't be super warm and fuzzy right away. But if there's a connection, they'll make a concerted effort because as a general rule, dismissive avoidants don't often do things they don't want to be doing. Number two, dismissive avoidants tend to prioritize intellectual connection in friendships over emotional connection. So you'll often see individuals who are dismissive avoidant as friends ending up in situations where they spend a lot of time talking about like political views or ideas or philosophies. And there's this idea that, oh, well, then if somebody's doing that, it's sort of more superficial. In a sense, there's that emotional depth that can be missing at times, but dismissive avoidants can often have very deep conversations about intellectual things. So there tends to be that sort of higher level connection. The other type of connection that dismissive avoidants tend to be pulled towards and prioritize are things that build this sort of camaraderie in friendships. So things like shared activities, things like having hobbies that they share together and have a fun time doing or engaging with, that tends to be a very big comfort zone for dismissive avoidance because it doesn't feel too vulnerable or too committal, right? Number three, dismissive avoidants can be a little bit extra picky with who they let into their friendship circle. And they tend to derive a lot of comfort from longer term friendships. So it's actually fairly frequent that you'll see a dismissive avoidant have very like long-standing friends, maybe friends that they've kept in the same group since high school or friends that they've had since grade school sometimes, or just these long-standing people, because once there's this sort of connection there, they'll tend to keep those friends along for a pretty long time. But they aren't necessarily the types of friends that they would like call and lean on or share personal life things with. There can sort of be this, yeah, we always just meet back up and hang out from time to time and pick up from where we left off. And it's these very like comfort, stability, longevity-based friendships, again, without sometimes that emotional depth. But it doesn't mean there's not a certain degree of like emotional connection that they get from the comfort and security of having that person there for a long time. So that's another number three. Number four, you will see that dismissive avoidants when they make new friends, and I think this is such an important part of the roadmap and sometimes a little bit mind-blowing, is they need to feel like they have at least 6 to 8 touch points as a general rule before committing to a friendship. What do I mean by 6 to 8 touch points? I mean that like if let's say somebody meets a potential new friend at yoga class and they're a dismissive avoidant. They're not going to be there. Like you just met them at yoga class, you had a nice chat after the class ended, and then you exchange numbers, and then that person's like, hey, let's hang out tomorrow. And the dismissive avoidant's like, yes, let's hang out tomorrow. That's not going to happen. You're going to see that dismissive avoidants see many touch points before committing to spending time together. So touch points can look like text exchanges where you share memes, you have little exchanges back and forth, share updates, maybe see each other over and over again at yoga class, have chats, afterwards. They tend to like be a lot slower to build that momentum and to know if this is going to make sense for them to spend their time with other individuals. And part of that is because they have such a high need for their own time with themselves. And usually that's actually time to co-regulate with themselves, essentially. That the idea of like letting somebody in and having their time with themselves to compete with time with somebody else can feel like there's sort of this dynamic. Now, you've heard me on this channel talk about social dismissive avoidance, or dismissive avoidants who tend to be a little bit more sociable and are sort of the social butterfly, but never really connect deeply with anybody. That may be the one exception to that piece. But as a general rule, almost all other dismissive avoidants are usually coming from that perspective. Number 5, this is a really important one. You'll generally see dismissive avoidants may exit a friendship after a single conflict. So I had a friend say to me one time that they were in a bit of a conflict with one of their friends, and it was a friend that they had had since high school. And they said, well, the friendship's over. It's so sad. And I was like, wait, what do you mean the friendship's over? And I said, well, we kind of got into an argument. Like, there's nothing else to say or do now. And I was like, why don't you just like hash it out? Like, it's been your friend for decades. Like, why not just have a conversation and try to move forward? And and he was like, you can do that. You can approach things that way. And in this particular case, sometimes we have a dynamic where we'll think like, okay, if you're dismissive avoidant, a conflict means the relationship is over. But really what that actually represents is learned helplessness to mend what's happening in the friendship, right? There's this learned helplessness of like, I don't know how to hash it out or work things out or communicate beyond it. So there's this assumption that all you can do is both people pull away, because that's how the dismissive avoidant is used to soothing. So again, that doesn't have to be that way. And sometimes if the other person initiates a resolution with a dismissive avoidant, they'll kind of like sweep it under the rug or pick up from where they left off. But a lot of times there's this idea, in the very least, that, oh my gosh, the friendship must be over now. Number 6, dismissive avoidants are often deeply affected by criticism in a friendship, just like they are in relationships. And I think that's a really important thing to keep note of, because if there's a lack of understanding there, then sometimes people can be critical or harsh or sort of like too direct, and that can feel very uncomfortable. Number 7, there may be an active distance in the friendship for when it comes to opening up. Dismissive avoidants, even if they've been friends with somebody for a long time, may actively keep people at arm's length emotionally. And if somebody tries to move too fast with them, having emotional conversations before the dismissive avoidant feels like they're even ready to be less private and open up about these things, then the dismissive avoidant will often feel violated and will head for the hills. They can run in the other direction and be like, whoa, this is too much. I feel overwhelmed. This is scaring me. You're asking me too much about myself too soon. And they really tend to prioritize their privacy early on. And part of that is because underneath all of this, dismissive avoidants have this deep wound or fear that if I let you really see or know me, you're going to find out that something's wrong with me or I'm shameful. So I don't want you to ever really see me deeply because you'll see my flaws. And again, like those are usually things that dismissive avoidants don't even have to feel like are that big of a deal. Like they're normal human things that maybe everybody does on some level that dismissive avoidants are really shaming themselves for. So number 8, I'm going to just sort of package a lot of the needs that dismissive avoidants have in friendships here as a whole. Okay. So they are usually looking for in friendships safety, humor, comfort, harmony. They're looking for things to be harmonious and easy and light. They're looking for empathy, acceptance. If they feel shamed instead of accepted, they won't want to participate in that friendship. Supportiveness, entertainment, and that can really be that like shared activities piece, and intellectual connection. Okay. So these tend to be really important things that they're looking for in terms of their needs. And again, I think this is really meaningful when you're looking at what somebody's looking for in a friendship, because it can help you understand like a roadmap of, I'll just share a story briefly. I had a client one time who had been friends with a dismissive avoidant for 8 years. And she was like, I'm getting so hurt because my friend never opens up to me about things. I found out that she's going through a separation. She told me like 2-3 weeks after it happened, like, why wouldn't she have called me? And this person was anxiously attached. And so their friendship of 8 years with a dismissive avoidant person, of course, they were always sharing because she was anxious. But her friend, she felt like was much slower to share things and was almost like by necessity was how she described it. Like when they're, she's going to go over to her house and the husband's separated. He's moved out. Now she has to tell me like these kinds of things. And she was really hurt. And when we realized, she was dismissive avoidant, the actual friend, she was able to be like, oh, so like she's looking for different things here in the friendship. She's looking for like lightness. That's why she's not trying to go deep. That's like how she's tending to want her friendship to be. She's looking for, entertainment and fun and humor and safety and comfort and ease. And so she was able to see that and be like, oh, it wasn't about me not having enough to offer or not being able to move the needle here. It was about that we had a disconnect in what we were looking for, right? Going back to that analogy of like rules, right? Now, the last two pieces here, I'll tell you number 9 and 10. But before I do, I just want to let you know if you want to do a whole deep dive into this topic and how to actually have thriving friendships with people of different attachment styles and literally be able to go in and see not just the dismissive avoidant roadmap, but like the anxious, the fearful avoidant. There's a whole course called Attachment Styles and Friendships you can check out fully for free. And if you spin to win, which is something we're doing for a limited time, you can spin to win like a 14-day trial to get it. You'll be able to get through it in that time, a 7-day trial plus free course for life, or even a free membership. There's a spin to win feature down below in the description. And you can actually spin to see what type of free membership you are able to get. So that's there just for a limited time. We're just doing that for this month. Now, number 8. The biggest wounds that dismissive avoidants tend to have are things like I am defective, or you'll think I'm shameful if you see me, right? Unsafe if there's conflict. Dismissive avoidants do not like it. They often feel emotionally unsafe. And then, of course, the obvious, the feelings of being trapped or engulfed, helpless, powerless if they rely on other people, not belonging, weak if they're too vulnerable, like a lot of these typical dismissive avoidant core wounds, and how they tend to cope. Number 10, as you can probably expect, is they cope by often stonewalling. And a lot of times, dismissive avoidants will report in friendships that they don't want to stonewall. They simply don't know what else to do. So they isolate, they retreat when they're feeling frustrated or hurt about a friendship or something that happened, and they often won't address things, which leads to, of course, a buildup of resentment and usually the friendship ending, which is why it's so important for dismissive avoidants to learn to communicate and talk through things. So I hope this gives you a really powerful roadmap on dismissive avoidance in friendships. Let me know your questions in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching and stopping by, and we'll see you next time. And don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy this channel.